Our next guest, Steve Lang, is here to talk about office environment, work environment. He brings a lot of experience, and I'll let him talk about that. But quite frankly, I like the idea of talking to Steve because many of us who have companies have a very interesting problem. How do we meld our older employees with these new employees and give them both the space they need? Steve Lang, welcome to the program.
Don, thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to be part of your show.
What do you see as trends in the workspace environment?
I think as a general sense, sometimes I call it the Starbucksification of the office. So, lounge seating, more collaborative, soft seating environments. The other big trend is, think of the traditional cafeteria and how do, and many mid-size and small corporations as well as large are thinking about that cafeteria that was the lunchroom in the back corner. And how do we transform that space, or how do we take that space and make it the kitchen in your home? And what I mean by that is, can you move that out into more of an open plan, or can you convert your lunch area to more of a work cafe? So again, some soft seating, some tables, yes, tables and chairs to eat your sandwich at, but also maybe some technology, some TVs or multimedia where, around the food service, around lunch, around a break, you're using that as a way to interact with people on a different level, on more of a social level, and using the technology to integrate. I think the other thing is linking technology to the work environment. So things like conference rooms that are reservable through your Outlook database system, or whiteboards that are electronic that will capture the information and save it, and you'll be able to redeploy or redistribute that information in a moment's notice with the click of a button for where we were on our project last week, and that information is then clearly displayed back up. Many people are visual learners. I know myself, I'm a visual learner. I have to write things down. I have to draw pictures, and when I write them and when I see the pictures, either on a whiteboard on a wall or in my notes on my binder, I remember it more. I have better recall of that information, and I can have it at my fingertips when I need it. And some people are just very tactile learners, and other people, as I said, in that range need privacy and need some time away. And again, there are private spaces for the folks that need privacy. If you're an HR person, you can't work in an open plan. You can't have a conversation on the phone in an open plan. And again, in that range, we would plan the HR department or person to have a much different level of privacy, perhaps, than a customer service person or something like that.
But what about these organizations like Verizon in locations where you don't even have a desk anymore? You only have a cabinet space, one by one cabinet, where you put your stuff in at night and find a desk in the morning.
It's so funny you say that, because that is a trend in many of the middle market companies where, we don't have enough desks for everybody because not everyone's in the office all the time. If we have salespeople that are in the field or service people that are in the field, from a real estate perspective, do they really need all that space to be dedicated to every employee when, in fact, all those employees are never in the office at one time other than a company meeting or some event? So from a pure real estate perspective, it's more of an efficient way to look at the business. But think of it too. Think of your home, and you have a cocktail party or a party at your home. Where do most people collaborate and convene? In the kitchen. And why do they do that? Well, you sort of typically have an island or a bar stool, height table, or some of that nature. Clearly there's food service and drinks and coffee and simple things like that, get people to, drop the real stodgy environment of, your secretary can call my secretary and we'll have a meeting 2 weeks from Tuesday. And they quickly get together and share information and ideas that may lead to a whole different way to take the company or that project or that strategy in a new direction that may not have been thought of before. So, listen, I'm with you. I'm in that baby boomer generation. Sounds that you may be a little older than me, but I think part of the challenge as leaders is, we need to perpetuate our organizations and plan for the next generation, and space and thinking about your physical space in which people work is one way to clearly have an effect on your culture. But one of the things I think where there's commonality is in noise and sound transmission, and in an open plan, the other thing that we think a lot about and certainly consult with our clients on is this idea of sound masking or white noise. The more open a space is, the more loud it is, and the more noise transmission, voice transmission of people's conversations and phone conversations transfer, and it can be counterproductive. So again, when you think about that space, you need to think about it in the holistic sense, not just the furniture per se, but the entire space and how it's utilized. When we look at privacy in the office, we really talk about the acoustical privacy versus the perceived acoustical privacy. It may look private, but I can hear your whole conversation from right outside the door. Or, did we plan the space and build it appropriately so that there really is a level of privacy?
Well, we recently had on a heating, ventilation, air conditioning executive, and he pointed out about how important it is to maintain a temperature level. How do you do? Some people like it cold, some people like it hot. How do you account for that? How do you get around that issue?
Don, I listened to that podcast, and I'm smiling because that is another topic for us that is a hot one. I would tell you from a facilities perspective, folks that manage the facility or have responsibility, for the space in which their people work, major issue of, one of the major issues is people are too hot or too cold. And that's not an easy one to solve. There are some trends in things like daylight harvesting. How do we give people more access to daylight and some of the heat that comes from daylight? So can we automate the building system to open up the shades, or can we do it manually to open up the shades in the day while the sun's shining, or pull them down in the evening? And that obviously the HVAC system, the ventilation system, has to be accompanied with that. But that is one of the biggest complaints in the office is too hot, too cold. And, different people, again, this is the issue, right? This is the major issue in any building. Different people have different needs, right? One person's too warm, the other person's too cold, and the temperature is exactly the same. But
how do you deal with for instance, years ago, I shared an office with a man who liked it very hot, and I'm a cold person, and we never did resolve it. The only way they finally resolved it was to separate us. It was one of anyway. That was, but the point being, do you make one part of the room hot and one part of the room cold, or colder, hotter, cooler?
So maybe out of the scope of this discussion, but when you think about building and building infrastructure, some of the things that clients are talking to us about, now this is more in a new construction environment, take the HVAC system that you traditionally find in the ceiling and put it in the floor through a raised floor. The New York Times building in New York City, again, this is a very large building, but the New York Times building is built on a raised floor with underfloor air and modular power throughout. And what that allows you to do, we have a space that's a kind of a workspace and a working showroom for us, and it's also on a raised floor where I'm calling you from. And the idea is there are diffusers in the floor, and we can move those diffusers around because the floor is effectively the plenum for the HVAC system. We can move those diffusers around the building to support people that need a little more cooling or a little less cooling. And each diffuser is operated by the user, so you can twist it and open it a bit, or twist it and keep it more closed. So there are some new technologies in terms of building infrastructure that are beginning to address that, at the building infrastructure level. But once the building is built and you're occupying it, it's a little more difficult, quite frankly, to start moving diffusers around in the ceiling to accommodate people. It's also very expensive.
Steve, you have to come back again and talk some more. This has been one of the more fascinating interviews I've had in a while. So please.
I appreciate it. It's a hot topic with all of our clients, both small, mid-sized companies and large corporations. And I will tell you, while we don't have all the answers, we are certainly in search of the right ones for the right client.
If our audience wanted to know more about your company or you, how do they find you?
They can find us on the web at www.danker.com. That's DANCKER.com. Or they can reach us on the phone. Our phone main line is 908-231-1600. Or they can email me at slang@danker.com.